Do you think there's such a thing as being too early or too late for an accelerator?
I think there's a lot of flexibility in the stage you're in. I think I will take companies into the program who are pre-revenue and even as early as an idea stage if the team is extraordinary and the market is big. Like that has to be a really special team. That's not the norm. That's the exception. Our typical mantra is that of our core 6 criteria, the first 3 are team. So it really is all about that team.
It's different for everyone, of course. Every single company sets their goals for the 3 months that they're in the accelerator in forms of goals, objectives, key results, and really sets out to achieve something. We focus less on the actual number achieved and more on the momentum. So if teams are moving quickly and they're continuing to build that momentum, that means it could be anything. And it's a signal that shows that the market that they're aiming for is engaged and they love what they're doing. And so we're really focused on that. Whether they hit a certain number that they set out to hit or not is less important than the momentum that they're carrying through. And a lot of times I'll have companies blow past that number halfway through program and realize that, wow, it really is not about the number. How quickly am I building and listening to what the market needs and then delivering what they need so they keep coming back.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today we're thrilled to have 2 powerhouse leaders from Techstars joining us, Kerty Levy and Camhi. Together they lead the vertical networks at Techstars, connecting founders with specialized support, mentors, and corporate partners across more than 50 industries. Kerty is a managing director of Techstars Anywhere and leads the AI ML vertical network with 80 startup investments and a global perspective. Shaped by living everywhere from Japan and Belgium, Sweden, China, and a bunch of other places, she's led multiple Techstars programs across different geos. She holds degrees from UC Davis. That's right up the road from us. I'm in east of Sacramento. And APS. Yeah, I live in Eldorado Hills. You probably know where that is. Moved out during COVID. And Keith is managing director of Techstars Healthcare Accelerator, powered by Permanente Medicine, and leads the vertical network there. Techstars, 7 years at there, 70 startup investments. He brings the founder turn investor perspective, having scaled FitLinxx, which was number 20 on the Deloitte Fast 500. Pretty cool and great play. Holds degrees from Cornell and MIT. Thanks both for coming on.
Thanks for having us. It's fun.
So I'd like to start with you, Kerty. What's your origin story?
Yeah, sure. It's defined by my worldview. I grew up in 6 countries and went to 13 schools by the time I graduated from college. My father was in international business and personal care, pharmaceuticals, medical device, and we moved all over. So up until college, they decided where I was going. But after college, I decided that I was going to head off to China. I spent 6 years in China. And so by the time I was in my early to mid 20s, I had been outside the US more than inside the US. And what that did for me was it really gave me an appreciation for different points of view, looking at the world through different lenses. I had to figure out really quickly the lay of the land. I had to figure out languages really quickly. I had to make friends really quickly. And for a natural introvert, I forced myself to be an extrovert very early on. I learned all the fake skills to do that. And even today, I feel like that upbringing of seeing so many different parts of the world, so Japan, Sweden, Belgium, Switzerland, has really enabled me to think big. And sometimes when I meet founders, I think I can actually see their visions more largely than they can. So that's really helped shape my view.
Amazing. Keith, and your turn. What's your origin story?
Yeah, so I grew up in the New York suburbs and had turned to entrepreneurship, I guess for a few reasons. First was that my career expectations of being a pitcher for the Yankees were dashed at about age 9 due to a lack of talent. But I was kind of always a techie at heart and liked building things. So I had to take things apart and put them together. And also, I guess I had a bit of a genetic predisposition to be an entrepreneur because we can't find anyone in the family who's held a job for a long time. So kind of all the stars aligned on that. But
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
Because you get a job and you're like, I don't want to do this.
No, it didn't work well for me. It didn't work. It was I guess my first couple of jobs reaffirmed that 6 months each at what turned out to be, companies that had very successful Act Ones in Route 128, Polaroid and Digital Equipment, if you remember back that far, and they didn't have good Act Twos, as it turned out. So
I'm
I
older
was
than I
in kind
look.
of slow-moving bureaucratic companies, but I started programming in middle school and building computers in high school, and so I was destined to work on hardware and software solutions on my own.
But I'd like to, for kind of the next set of questions, talk about your entrepreneurial journeys. I think this is a common thing I see with a lot of folks that work at Accelerators is that you guys have been founders and entrepreneurs beforehand. Kirty, maybe I could start with you. What path kind of through startups and around the world take, and how did you end up at Techstars?
Yeah, mine's a little bit less traditional than Keith's in terms of startup background. But, when I graduated from UC Davis, I bucked the trend. Everyone went to San Francisco to look for a job. And I put on a backpack and went across Europe and then jumped on the Trans-Siberian Railway and landed in China, in Beijing, China. And it was under martial law. Tiananmen had just happened. And it was the Wild West. So opportunities in those early days. One of my long-term mentors, Roberta Lipson, she had started a trading company, eventually went on to start the first foreign hospital chain in China. And just there was opportunity everywhere. I spent a lot of those early years helping Fortune 100s enter the China market. So literally helping them figure out, like, should we greenfield? Should we partner with these guys? How big is this market? What should we do? So early customer discovery, figuring out what we're doing in China. And I couldn't help but having the itch to start my own thing. I took a left turn though. I had been in China for already 5 or so years, and I'm an athlete. And I don't know if you guys remember, but in those days, the smog was so thick, you couldn't see half
I
a
was
block.
there in 2008, right before the Olympics, and they had cleaned it up. And
yes, they had. It's actually cleaner today than ever.
And I would go to blow my nose at night, and it was like black, just black coming out of my nose. And I got this funny story, and I'll let you continue, which is I'm getting in a taxi in Beijing, putting on my seatbelt. I had to sit in the front for whatever reason. And the taxi driver was like, no, you don't need a seatbelt. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to wear a seatbelt. Okay. I'm from America. We do that. And so I put the seatbelt across my shirt, and I get out, and my wife's like, nice sash. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I had a black tar sash across my white t-shirt because nobody had ever used a seatbelt.
Yeah, that's right. And it was that dirty.
Yeah, it was just that dirty. Yeah. Just generally, that was 2008, and you were there in the 90s, which is a whole different thing.
It was absolutely filthy. I decided at that time that if I was going to put myself in a really good position to live healthily, I needed to be more global. So instead of staying and starting a business, I'll just really quickly tell you my alter life would have been starting a business in learning and development for the 30 and 40-year-olds in China who had never had an education. They went through the Cultural Revolution, they went through the Great Leap Forward, and here they were running companies at this time, and they had no idea how to run business. And I would have cleaned up. I was ready to put these centers all over China. But anyway, instead I went to business school.
As one does.
Opened up my global options, and from there ended up eventually going into the startup world in San Francisco in the early 2000s during the .com era. So another big transformational time in tech, and worked in ed tech. So in product development and also in business development, I was one of the first employees at the first company, helped them raise their seed fund, and really enjoyed it, loved it. And I would have stayed in the Bay Area and probably again founded my own, but my husband moved me to Iowa. So he joined a family firm, and I was the trailing spouse to Iowa. And Iowa was also a bit of an opportunity, untapped everywhere. I mean, there were really, really gritty, incredible founders, hardworking people here, and so much opportunity to really help them think big. So starting first, I came here just working for the Downtown Community Alliance, helping develop new companies in the area, bring events and activities to the downtown. And then I ended up joining a family firm, privately owned company in the ingredient space. Today, if they were in the VC world, they'd be seen as a growth stage, probably Series C company. That's the stage they were at when I entered. And it was 9 years of literally hold on. Every year was different. We were starting new businesses. We were entering new markets. And so one of the things I did there was started an entrepreneurial venture in the personal care industry. That company made ingredients. It was a biochem company, made ingredients for food, feed, pet food. And we grew plants all over the world, rosemary, spearmint, etc. And I saw an opportunity to bring these natural ingredients to the personal care industry and took a swing at it. And I swung hard. And we went at it for about 4 years. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about long sales cycles. I learned a lot about testing in order to get through hurdles. But really what I learned was, wow, there is so much that I would have benefited from had I had someone who could be there as a startup founder next to me, helping me through this. And so at some point, after about 4 years, the business was starting to take off, but I realized I would be sitting there in a company where I couldn't pivot off of, we kind of had this supply. I couldn't take it exactly where I wanted it to go. And I thought, you know what? I can help founders with all the experience I have in starting businesses more than stay in the company and operate it from here. And so we folded it back into one of the other divisions, and I never looked back. I've started working with founders as an investor, as an advisor, and that's where I think most of my skills can be best placed.
Amazing. We'll circle back to the little bridge to Techstars after we hear about Keith's traditional startup background. And just real quick, what I know Iowa for is the MIU, which is the Maharishi University, because I do TM.
Oh yeah,
that's
I've been down there.
Really big there. Yeah.
Transcendental meditation. Yeah. I'm certified.
Okay.
Yes.
We could talk about, we have that. We have a lot in common.
At the basic level, basic.
I have to go I've done the advanced techniques, and now I have to go do the city program at some point. So I'll go to Iowa at some point.
Great.
Yeah. But I could talk about that for an hour. But well, let's hear about Keith's and his traditional startup background.
The meditation thing sounds pretty cool.
I've had a meditation teacher on, actually. One of the famous ones who taught Ray Dalio and Bridgewater, who's on the podcast like a couple hundred episodes ago. But yeah, really amazing.
Yeah. One of my Series A lead, Gus Tyatt at Trinity Ventures, is now kind of a full-time mindfulness practitioner, and fascinating backstory there. But it's
well, it's part of my backpacking days, like me and Kirty, backpacking in our 20s or whatever. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do the 10-day silent retreat. Sure, yeah, sure, I'll do this like this and that. And yeah, so I spent a lot of time in my 20s doing that and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And meditation was part of that. Impressive.
I am impressed by that, because I've lasted, 15 minutes multiple times at attempting long sessions. So it's, that's.
Oh yeah, you should go do the 10-day silent retreat. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done.
I am sure it will.
I think I cried for like 3 days straight. I think like days like 2, 3, and 4, I just cried. Yeah.
Amazing.
Just like boredom and everything else. So yeah, walk us through your journey, Keith, of building FitLinxx, a great play, and then eventually getting to Techstars.
But, after working at a couple slow moving companies, I went to the other extreme. I've been part of 4 startups, 2 of which are my own. But the first experience post Route 128 slow moving companies was with a solopreneur, great entrepreneur named Ron Harris, who was building custom electronic boards and then getting them manufactured for clients. And he needed a number 2 when a little fintech company he was building for started taking off, named Bloomberg. And he was selling the hardware that became the Bloomberg terminal and just skyrocket growth, and eventually sold that to Bloomberg. So it's kind of the number 2 person for him there. And then worked at a family business, which we were selling when my dad passed away. But then I started my first company in my late 20s, and Ron Harris, who did the Bloomberg exit, became one of my key investors and advisors in that. So that's the kind of segue from that experience, from big companies to a micro to starting my own. And FitLinxx is the first venture-backed fitness technology company. Fitness technology was not a category when we started this. This was just kind of my personal passion project. The best idea I had when I decided I had to be an entrepreneur, which was that I had gone through grad school at MIT, by day working with advanced technology, at night going to the gym and writing stuff down with golf pencils and workout cards, and thinking, this is silly. The equipment should be able to collect data on me. I want my graphs and reports. That's what keeps me motivated personally. And so we got my college undergrad roommate together, and we went into mom's basement and started building mom's basement gym, attaching computers onto weight stack equipment to coach you through a workout and collect your data. the whole technology journey there on getting it to
Like
work.
a first generation tonal, if you're
Yeah,
familiar with that.
well, yes, yeah, that was the first of what would then be 10 generations of that, but it was it was kind of this computerized equipment. And I guess the kind of key pivot points along the way were one we had as one of our test users in the basement ended up being the strength coach for the New York Knicks, and that became our first customer. So we went from Mommy's basement to back in the Patrick Ewing days. So they were using our equipment in their gym to coach the athletes. I guess pivot point number 2 was realizing that even if we captured the entire pro sports market, it would be a terrible business. And so we realized a year into working with the Knicks that we had to pivot into something else. And that's kind of when I emerged into the health tech space. We found that a market where we had much better product market fit was in hospital health centers, in YMCA's doing preventive healthcare, step down physical therapy, and kind of got drawn into this health tech space, which I didn't know much about at the time. And then it turned out that the 2 biggest companies in the industry were starting to compete with us: Life Fitness in the US, the dominant gorilla, the Goliath in the US, and then the Goliath in Europe was Technogym. All had competing products. And that ended up allowing us to partner with all their competitors. So we ended up working with Precor, Cybex, Nautilus, and becoming ultimately the leaders in the category because we had bigger distribution and a better product. Life Fitness ended up dropping their competing product, coming on board with us. And that's when we reached that kind of fast 500, reached all the way up to number 20 in a category that hadn't really existed before, and got backing. We got our Series A funding from Trinity and Canaan Partners, and then did a wild ride through the internet bubble, and then a health tech play, and a wild storyline. But so that was kind of the rapid growth, venture-backed startup, slow at first and then rapid once it started getting product market fit. Ended up merging with the company that did the sensor for the Nike sneaker. And we ended up exiting as a health tech play many years later. And then I went on to do my second startup, which was an idea from my wife, who was working with our children on motor skills and sports skill development. And we made kind of interactive gyms for kids where you would learn motor skills and sports skills by way of play. And big lesson from FitLinxx was, while that was a really fun ride, I learned 2 new words, which were liquidation, preference, and dilution from working with venture capitalists. And so it was a great ride, and they go, oh, we could have taken the early exit and done better than this. But so Great Play was the keep it small, own it all, more of a lifestyle business, but we rolled it out as a franchise system. And so rolled out what became a Franchise 500 company with 30 locations. And that's a beautiful business. We were just kind of collecting royalties and didn't need any venture capital because the franchise fees let us open up the locations. And that kept going for years. The royalty collection kept going for years, even after I turned to focusing on investment myself. And that was kind of the point at which I started advising companies and venture funds, and ultimately at Techstars.
It was funny. We have in the outline I shared with you guys the biggest mistake you made early on, and you kind of brought out the story of liquidation preference. Maybe you could talk about what were the terms on the cap table, and how did that put you in a disadvantage in an exit scenario, just for the founders out there listening that may not know when they're looking at a term sheet.
Yeah, and I think it's relevant to today's AI situation where funding can be widely available if you're in certain categories, and just be careful that you know what to do with it. Our Series A was kind of a classic pre-internet bubble round, which was great. So 1x liquidation preference on a $7 million raise. I think it was in the 20s post money, and this is 20 some odd years ago, so that's value today on what a Series A would be, and so that made sense. What didn't make sense was the internet bubble emerging and crazy uptick in valuations then. So I think we grew, we're in the 40s or 50s in the next round with J.H. Whitney coming in, and another 1x liquidation preference there. When the bubble burst, we were the last remaining fitness tech company to get any funding, and we were very fortunate because we also had this healthcare play. So we had UBS Capital, and then Health South, a major strategic player, came in for a round that was valued probably 100 post. But one of the VCs dropped off. Well, when a VC drops off, you got to punish the VC that drops out. And so you, meaning the other VCs, for non-participation. So they say, how about a 4x liquidation preference on this one to punish them for not going along? Fortunate. And so what that's meaning is that, the hurdle before the first dollar exit is starting to add up and add up. In parallel with that, they made a management bonus pool, though, to make sure we were taken care of. So all of a sudden, the stock ownership became less relevant than the bonus pool and the liquidation preference when that starts happening. So it's kind of an interesting story that we teach founders about today. When you're taking on a lot of capital, just make sure you know how to deploy it to get to the multiples that are necessary to get the valuations that'll put that in the money.
Yeah, I was talking to a private equity guy on the podcast a few episodes ago, and he goes, show me the valuation and I'll show you the structure. And I think what he meant by that is like, hey, I can get you whatever valuation you want. It's just a matter of like what the structure on the cap table is going to be for that valuation. So you want to be a unicorn? Great. You're going to have a 2x lick pref on this. And other things like that. But I'd love to, get into Techstars. What, for each of you, what originally attracted you guys to Techstars? What's that origin story?
Well, for me, it was serendipitous. I was living in Iowa, as I mentioned at the time. Good friend of mine, Isaac Kato, who used to run the Techstars Seattle program, said, hey, they're starting a program. Techstars is starting a program in Iowa with Grinnell College, and I'm recommending you for the job. So I quickly looked up Techstars, and wow, I was just blown away with what Techstars was doing, the original mission, incredible, the give first mentality, the culture of Techstars drew me right in. The group of MDs that I became colleagues with are
not medical doctors, managing directors.
Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah. Managing directors are still some of the most brilliant, supportive, incredible people I've ever met. So wonderful to work with. And so that's what brought me in. And I'll talk a little bit later about the spinning up of that program, but it was a no-brainer, like helping entrepreneurs succeed. What a fantastic mission. So that's what brought me in.
And what about you, Keith?
Yes, similar. So I was living out in Colorado at the time, and which is where Techstars is founded. And so knew a lot of Techstars folks from the area, and I was starting to advise startups and invest and angel invest. And there's really, if you're playing in the angel space, there's no better platform than Techstars to be doing that at scale with the scope of support, funding that goes with it, the peer group and so forth. So after independently advising a couple venture funds in the area and being an entrepreneur in residence for them, I moved over to Techstars to do it on their platform. The other thing that I found really attractive was the culture. I wouldn't do well at most other people's companies. Like I had been the signatory of my own paychecks for 25 years at that point. And I told the founders, I think this is the only company that I could really work for. And part of it is just the culture they created with the give first philosophy that David Cohen and Brad Feld talk about, and Brad has a new book about, just the founder first mentality. We're always going to focus on the founder as opposed to any other stakeholder. Really resonated with my own thinking about how I would want to do this. And it's a really wonderful position to be in, to be able to support founders and have the backing of a powerful engine.
And I forgot to mention, Brian, when I left Camhi, the first thing I did was start working with startups in Iowa. So I was an entrepreneur in residence for the Iowa Agritech Accelerator. And I found myself during my second year there being asked by the board to be the managing director of that accelerator. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. And I had not been in that position. So to be the person who's investing in a number of companies at a time and really putting together a cohort and then shepherding them through and making sure that they were successful on the back end, I already had the bug. So when Isaac called me and told me about the Techstars opportunity in Iowa, I thought that's really where I should be.
So let's talk about the vertical networks. What is that? Give us kind of a high level synopsis of, why you guys started doing that, because of course it started in Boulder with kind of the flagship accelerator. And then you guys kind of spread geographically around the world. And then there was this gap that you guys identified in going after verticals. Maybe talk about what the mission is and what Vertical Networks does there at Techstars.
First of all, we've got over 5,000, 6,000 companies in our network, right? And they're in
These are all companies that have gone through the accelerator over the years.
Gone through the accelerator. And obviously some have not fared well. Many have fared well. And there are a lot that are just going concerns, right? And so we were looking for ways to help our company succeed even more. We were thinking about, and Techstars is structured in a way where we have partner programs, and then we have sort of fund run programs. Those tend to be more generalist. The partner programs tend, but don't necessarily need to be, more vertically focused. So Keith, I'll talk about his program in a little bit, but the partner program I ran in Iowa was a generalist program. Grinnell College was open to anything that really matched the Midwest need. So we started to see that, for founders to be successful, maybe they want to connect with groups of potential mentors, potential customers, potential partners within their verticals. And we started to look at, well, we've got all the data on them. Let's figure out how to group them, put together a platform in order to enable them to come together. We started launching roundtables per vertical. So 180 founders would sign up and jump in, and we break them out into different rooms, and we'd have discussions with them to figure out, it was more peer helping peer, but also we learned a ton about what they were looking for. And then we have put on events tied to major industry conferences. Maybe it's a side event, bring people together who happen to be at Health for that conference or Money 2020. And then bring together our network of partners and potential customers that these founders be working with and figure out ways to cross-pollinate them. So maybe it's a workshop or a panel, or maybe a happy hour. I knew I threw a happy hour in the health tech vertical in Boston a couple of years ago and brought together founders from a bunch of different areas with funders, but also potential partners in the space. We're really looking for opportunities to bring people together and help them succeed. Again, focused on the founder first, and then looking for ways to get more organizations, potential partners, customers interested in this group of founders. I don't know if you want to add anything, Keith, but that's the main sort of driver behind the vertical networks, is to support the founders.
Agreeing with all of that, and I would add on, and maybe my vantage point on this might help make clear what I'm saying. But before I became a managing director at Techstars, I actually started at Techstars managing our accelerators. So I was hiring the people who are in my role today and overseeing them, originally just on the East, along with Daniel Feld, who's Brad's brother, who was running the West, and eventually doing that globally. So I was traveling around the world, visiting our partners, visiting our accelerators when we had 40 some odd accelerators around the world. And what I saw from that was that I think our real superpower, our real differentiation in the market is our distributed network. So there are plenty of good local accelerators that are standalone and it can do a dozen companies a year. And there's obviously at least one or two massive scale accelerators that are all in one location. And I think what we do really well is we do distributed scale. And so we're able to do these little nodes of 8 to 10 companies at a time in various geographies and or various verticals, give them a lot of handholding and attention, often with a partner who can help them during that 3-month period. And then we're communicating with each other all over the place. So all of our managing directors are in touch all the time. We're all on a WhatsApp group together and saying, oh, here's the latest trend in pre-seed term sheets. And what are you seeing? And we hear from Australia and Tokyo. And, so this is like this superpower in our pocket of being able to have a pulse on the industry at any time. That's the distributed network part. To take advantage of the scale, we now have, as Kirty pointed out, thousands of alumni, hundreds going through a year. And to slice and dice and take advantage of that volume, it makes sense to group them in some way. The natural way is geographical. It's easy to get a geography together. But the other major axis we have is this vertical networks. And so whether we're giving investors access to a pool of companies, if they're a healthcare investor, they would like to kind of optimize to meet the healthcare companies. Or if we want them to get peer support on go-to-market strategy, the regulatory burden in healthcare is fundamentally different than a lot of other categories. Let's get an expert speaker on that or roundtables on that. And so this idea had been kicking around Techstars for, I think, a decade. I think David Cohen had old emails on like, hey, we should do this, but always too busy. And so a bunch of us under David's direction kind of got together and say, what shape would this take? And we had the latitude of being able to focus on that for about a year to come up with some concepts for it. And this is what's emerging. I think it's incredibly powerful for the alumni and even filtering into the programs itself when companies are with us on how they tap that network.
And it sounds like it's both verticals, but also it could be some geos, right? Kind of included in the program, and maybe even some workload categories like AI or...
Happens automatically because we run an accelerator physically in a place for most of the accelerators. Kirty also runs a virtual one. But when we're geographically based in Washington, D.C. and focused on healthcare, so the D.C. part comes about naturally. Our healthcare part, when we're in program, comes about naturally by way of the relationship with Kaiser Permanente's medical group, Permanente Medicine. So that happens when we're local, but the alumni group in DC gets together. So the geo we get almost for free. It's how do you maximize the the verticals, and Kirty runs probably our broadest so-called vertical
Yeah.
network.
I was going to say it's, we're also playing around with remember I talked about the .com era, or the internet was a vertical at one point in time. We're sort of at that stage with AI. So some of our founders are in the, they have been going concerns. They're actually doing really well with their businesses, but they need to back work AI into their businesses, and they're going quickly. And so being able to provide them a platform, a place to come and learn, collaborate, figure out what tools are best, how should I go about this, what did you learn, et cetera. And then new founders coming in who are all AI native and who are saying, oh yeah, I'm finding credits here, I'm doing this quickly, here's a tool I can use. And so being able to help all of our founders across that, we actually made AI ML a vertical for as long as it needs to be. I think it will ultimately get split into a bunch of different verticals within AI. So take robotics, physical AI, or whatever they happen to be. But right now we want to make sure there's enough for everyone. And so we are calling it a vertical right now.
Gotcha. So for the founders out there listening to the pod, how do they get started with Techstars? Do they just go to techstars.com and try to figure it out? Like, what's the best way to sort of engage and kind of take the first step?
So many different ways. So yeah, for sure. Showing up to an online event, we post those all the time. There are managing directors recruiting twice a year for their programs. And so, right now we've got virtual office hours out there, and founders can jump in and learn about Techstars either one-on-one or in a group setting. There is a whole community side of Techstars, which is focused on founders who aren't even ready for an accelerator, so they can learn about what is Techstars. They run a volunteer organization, startup weekends. So people who want to put their toe in the water on what is this whole startup thing about, they can learn there. And then again, we have events at some of these in-person locations, city events. So for example, the city of Boston is hosting a big gathering of alumni and friends. So new founders who want to come, they can come to that on Wednesday night and learn about Techstars that way. So I think we're there locally in person, we're there online, we're there for self-help, set up office hours, learn something, or listen to a panel. Lots of different ways.
You dropped the word virtual in there really quick. So I wanted to talk about that, right? Because we all just went through COVID, 4 or 5 years ago. Now everybody's back in person. Yeah, I've had people on the pod who are remote first all the way. It's the best. And I've had, obviously, people said the opposite. What are some challenges of running a virtual accelerator versus an in-person one?
So the big secret is it's not 100% virtual. I have my founders meet 3 times in person for a week each, one at the beginning, one in the middle, one at the end. I am a big believer in-person relationships can really only be cemented, formed in person, but virtual allows for the flexibility of the founder who needs to be a lot of different places. They need to be near and around family, so that doesn't rule out founders who can't pick up for 3 months and be in a certain location. And so the way that we run virtual, though, our founders love it. We are in touch every single week. They get the same amount of attention as they would when they would be in a particular building. And who runs an office from a desk in one spot anyway, right? Unless they're doing it virtually. And so we're doing the one-on-ones, we're holding the accountability meetings, we are doing any kind of, optional workshops they want to grab, they're all there. So for me, it's all about flexibility and definitely frequent in-person touches. So once a month.
And I've done both. I think the punchline for founders is that if you're able to do a full-time in-person program, you will probably get more benefit from that. The peer bonding, hallway conversations that come out are terrific. But for a large number of founders who simply can't do that.
Yeah, they got a mortgage, they got a couple kids. They're like, I'm not going to go move to Boulder for 90 days or whatever it is. Yeah.
100%. I mean, it's so valuable. I think you can get a large percentage of the benefit with with the method that Kirty described without having to relocate. But and I'll give you a concrete example. So I used to run our program with Melinda Gates's Pivotal Ventures, focused on the future of longevity. And so the whole idea was the family care, solutions for the family caregiver who's dealing with aging parents and children and disrupting careers. And if they're the individual that these solutions are meant for, they're likely to be the founders of these companies, and asking them to go relocate for 3 months is antithetical to the principle of this accelerator even existing. And so that was a important compromise to make, is to say, hey, we're going to only have you come in twice, 3 times a year, just like Kirty described, and get 90% of the value in 20% the time. And I think that that's a great trade-off to be able to make. But so founders, if you have the luxury of doing either, come in person. It's really great to be with a group of founders for 13 weeks.
I'll make the case for Slack being a great hallway conversation place as well. A lot of sharing there. Founders who have gone through my programs, all of my programs have been hybrid, meaning some in person, some not, are very, very tightly bonded. They continue to be the CEOs from my last program are still meeting every Friday morning on a virtual call. They support each other with their celebrations, and also when they're in trouble, hey, let me help you with this. Let me help you with that. So I think you can do both. And this translates not only from program, but to work too, for startup founders in general. How do you form a team? Do you go all in one place? It's a big question, right? So being able to operate in both, I think, is the superpower.
So we talked a little bit about how to get in touch and how you kind of support founders before Techstars. So for founders listening, how are you supporting them during the program, whatever it is? The 12-week program, I think, is pretty standard. And then how do you support them after the program? Keith, maybe you could start with the healthcare, how it works in healthcare.
Yeah. So we have some common elements of all our programs. We sort of have a core approach to this, but any given program might vary a little under the leadership of different managing directors and or partnerships we have in that program on what we focus on. But general flow of we have kind of 12 weeks and then a week of demo day and showing off what you did. So the 13th week of storytelling. I'll generally open with a week of intensive workshops, starting with strategic planning. It's sort of the slow down to speed up phase of the program. Go really evaluate your strategy from top to bottom, broad vision, the major milestones that are coming up, the change you want to make in the world, what your KPIs are, what you're going to work on and chip away at. And then begin the process of saying, how am I going to explain this to the outside world? So we want to knock out in 1 week almost a hyper accelerator of plan the business and say how you're going to explain it to others. What's the investment memo look like for this? And then we roll into 2 weeks of mentor feedback after that. So we get about 100 mentors involved on average with a typical program, and they'll speed date with the founders for weeks 2 and 3 with the purpose of giving feedback on the strategic plan and also matching up to see if there are some mentors who want to work with the company for the rest of the program. And so the goal is to both pressure test your business model and find 4 or 5 mentors who are going to continue to work with you for the next 10 weeks. And then we go into a weekly cycle of declaring objectives for the week, going in, trying to accomplish them, measuring them, say what you learned from it, whether or not you succeeded with it, rinse, repeat. We have workshops throughout and work with mentors, and it's really a mentor-driven experience for each company, ultimately culminating with investor readiness and a demo day. But so that's kind of the core element of it. When we have a partner involved, like I'm working with Permanente Medicine on my program. We also, for the healthcare vertical, we also have programs in Baltimore that work with Johns Hopkins and Care First, and out in Chicago, working with Northwestern Medicine, along with partial focuses in other programs like Ohio State, Boston, and others. So when there are partners involved, we also get an additional layer of benefits. Like we have 40 some odd mentors who are physicians at Permanente Medicine working with our companies who are trying to find them early opportunities to find product market fit and even potentially identify the opportunity to pilot with an organization like Kaiser Permanente, which usually a pre-seed company will have no access to doing. That's usually kind of like a Series B activity. So that's the other superpowers when we have a partner involved in getting that sort of access.
And I'll just add for the fund programs or the generalist programs, every cohort that comes in, we look at the individual companies and we figure out, okay, which mentors are we going to bring in for this particular group of companies. So I might have a handful in prop tech or supply chain or manufacturing. And then I'm looking out not only through the mentors who have worked with Techstars companies in the past, but also who do I know in my network and who else do I want to bring in to help these companies succeed? And it really, there's a lot of flexibility for each of us to build exactly the individualized program that we want to. So individualized for the founder, for the company that's coming in, but also for the cohort each time.
So I'm a huge fan of accelerators. As an early stage VC, I invest in pre-seed companies. I see a lot of pre and post accelerator companies, and it's a pretty night and day difference. I think anytime I encounter a first time founder or founding team, I say, hey, go apply to all the great accelerators, including Techstars, and see where you can get in. And it's more than worth the 5 or 7% dilution you're going to take, or whatever that deal is. Where do you think accelerators are still misunderstood today?
The point I was just making, I think people misunderstand accelerators as being a class, like a university class or some kind of workshop, series of workshops. Whereas I think the accelerator is truly about each company's journey. Where are they entering, and truly where are they accelerating to? So some are going to come in pre-revenue and they're figuring out what is my ICP, and then finding, product market fit, finding ideal customer profile, and then finding product.
I always try to pull the jargon out and the acronyms that the three of us just know, like the back of our hand, but some listeners might be going, what is ICP?
And then others might come in with quite a bit of revenue. So there are a couple things that happen there. One, they might have revenue, but they really need to figure out, where do we go from here? What is the strategy? What's the scale? How do I open this little teeny tiny wedge that I found and make it bigger? Or maybe they need support in product or tech or something. And then there's a lot of, hey, we want to enter the US market. We have some revenue over here. We've figured out this is a thing. Now I want to join an accelerator in the US and take it from there. And we've had a number of companies do that.
And so, Keith, do you think there's such a thing as being too early or too late for an accelerator? And if so, what are those delineations?
I think there's a lot of flexibility in the stage you're in. I think I will take companies into the program who are pre-revenue, and even as early as an idea stage, if the team is extraordinary and the market is big. That has to be a really special team. That's not the norm. That's the exception.
Yeah, because in a way, an accelerator is taking a bet on the team in a lot of ways.
Yeah, our typical mantra is that of our core 6 criteria, the first 3 are team. So it really is all about that team. And I think almost every stage of venture up until very late stages would say team is number one, but team is often close to the only thing, because traction alone isn't going to be the thing yet. We don't have the numbers to back up that this is clear product market fit or is ready for scale, but it's, can this team pull off something in a really large market? Yeah. So I think that's...
what about too late? Is there such a thing as too late for the accelerator? At what point you're like, yeah, you kind of don't need us?
Well, so I right now I have a company in the current program that already has $10 million in revenue on the way in, and is trying to figure out what their second act is. Right? They have a core product line, extraordinary founder, extraordinary solving of a key problem. They're now they have customer concentration risk as well as product line risk, and so how and where do I expand and get some visibility, and also working with Kaiser. So I think too late is more driven by the company's decision that we're past the stage of being willing to take the dilution hit of an accelerator. I think anywhere up to a pre-seed, typically I'll see companies from 0 to a couple $1 million in funding will still think an accelerator makes sense. Up to, a few $1 million of revenue could still makes sense. But
I get those MFN carve out letters every once in a while. Hey, we got into such and such accelerator. We got to waive your MFN. Is that okay? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. The accelerator is not really a funding event, and so our terms are flexible to that. So as long as you look at the accelerator itself as not a funding event, then that makes sense. And then our safe now is an uncapped MFN safe itself, so it plays nicely with any capital source. Where we used to have terms that would not have played well with other capital.
So Kirty, I'll ask you this question, and I'm kind of going back and forth. So feel free to chime in if you want to follow on any of the answers. But so imagine you come in, it's just a team and a good idea, at day 0, and now they're at day 90 at demo day. What does meaningful success and traction look like in that 90-day span? Like where you're patting yourself on the back, like, we did a good job here.
Yeah.
And this team did a good job.
It's different for everyone, of course. We have them during that first week that Keith talked about. Every single company sets their goals for the first 3 months that they're in the accelerator in forms of goals, objectives, key results, and really sets out to achieve something. We focus less on the actual number achieved and more on the momentum. So if teams are moving quickly and they're continuing to build that momentum, that means it could be anything. It could be users, it could be LOIs, it could be, depending on what industry they're in, it could be revenue, it can be a whole number of things that just show they're moving from stage to stage really quickly. And it's a signal that shows that the market that they're aiming for is engaged and they love what they're doing. And so we're really focused on that. Whether they hit a certain number that they set out to hit or not is less important than the momentum that they're carrying through. And a lot of times I'll have companies blow past that number halfway through program and realize that, wow, it really is not about the number. It's about how quickly am I building and listening to what the market needs and then delivering what they need so they keep coming back.
So Keith, you mentioned, the first 3 criteria out of 6 is team, 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 which I love. How do you spot great teams and founders who can benefit most from programs like you guys run?
So yeah, it's an interesting one. So I think part of it is just their aptitude for pulling off what they're working on. So technical skill in a technical field will sort of speak for itself, and then their ability to explain what they're doing. We teach a lot about the storytelling aspect of it. So I don't care if it's polished, but more like, can you explain why the world needs this and why you're going to run through walls to do it? So it's this sense that they're going to relentlessly execute on something and they have a unique vantage point for pulling it off. And so I think those are the things that come together. And interestingly, is we all recently did a portfolio exercises within our investment team where we went, and Kirty and I have fairly sizable Techstars portfolios now, having been here for a while. And we had to leave that voice notes on every one of the companies and what we like, and there's that process of going through them and then all comparing notes on them. It's interesting that I'm increasingly finding myself even more drawn to the big swing for the fences bets that could be really big or go to zero. And it's okay. Some of them are going to fail, but the safer bets turn out to become, kind of safe-ish double, triple outcomes. But when we're looking at the ones that are really move the needle, it's the folks working on these really big, unrealistically big things that maybe they have a shot at, but may or may not come together. And then the accelerator can help them do that. And so a bunch of the ones that early on in my first accelerators, these are the ones that would come in off the wait list for me. It's like, I really like what they're doing, but this is way too risky. How could I possibly put this in front of a partner? And then they get in off the wait list and like, wow, that turned out to be the best company in the class. I got to do more of that stuff. And it goes back to my own willingness. I'm both a hardware and a software guy. So I'm not, so I'm willing to do the hard things and do regulated fields. And companies that can persevere through those challenges will end up, it's harder, but they'll have markets to themselves. And so I find myself drawn more and more to that. And so founders who can explain why they would want to do something as hard as they're working on, it gets really interesting. And I got, those are my favorite examples to talk about after too, because they're just working on really interesting things.
Kirty, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Just say that the founder makes all the difference, and really understanding people's backgrounds and where they come from and some of the hardships, some of the breakups they've gone through before with other founders. Digging in, it gets really personal early on, because even if they come in with a little something, some traction or whatnot, if it's not the right founding team, breaking up is so easy if something goes wrong. So we spend a lot of time up front getting to know where founders' mindsets are, what's driving them, how do they know each other, where do they feel the other one adds value to the company. So really digging in to personal issues.
That's why, being a solo founder is so hard, right? Because you have to do a little bit of everything, and having those complementary skill sets on the team is so important. That said, I do back solo founders sometimes, but it's, it's just, you got a lot of work. And Keith, what you said kind of reminded me of, I'm paraphrasing Sam Altman. He said in a podcast at some point, he said, "It's when I look at a startup, I try not to think about, I try to think about like if it goes well, like how big will this be? Will it be $1 trillion company if it goes well?
Right.
Will it be billions of revenue kind of company if it works? Versus like what you said resonates, which is some safe, mediocre 5 or 10% monthly growth and kind of a well understood field is going to it's going to be a mediocre kind of outcome. Maybe you kind of get to tens of millions of revenue and it just kind of fizzles out, versus like, hey, this is like a moonshot thing, and if it works, it's a big thing. And that's very venture scalable stuff, right?
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And I'd say early on in my investing, especially when I was doing it with other people's money instead of my own, I was much more risk averse because the fear of failure of any given company. I didn't want to look stupid for picking this company that crashed and burned 6 months after graduating. And then I think upon getting more confidence that they weren't going to fire me for a couple going sideways, and instead thought that it was pretty exciting to have some significant upside potential. I think I got more and more comfortable saying that that's really the main criteria, and risk of any given company failing is negligible in importance compared to some of them being able to be the lottery tickets and big wins.
So,
And it's much more fun too. It's
yeah,
going for something really big.
right. It's data centers in space. Yeah. It's like, what? I guess you guys could argue you're the industry leaders in corporate partnerships and fitting these into the accelerator. Maybe you could share some examples or stories of some of these corporate partnerships that really accelerated a startup's journey. I'm sure you guys got many stories on tap.
So even if the partner is a generalist partner, they can play a big part. The case was with Grinnell College. Their main driver for being a partner was to, obviously they wanted to make a return. And even JT, who was the chief investment officer there, said, look, half my board wants to see a return and the other half wants to see a return, and they want to enhance the startup community in the Midwest. They want to make a name for Grinnell College, and they want to do these feel good things. But where the partner is really helpful, JT was one of the best partners that I could have had. He was the chief investment officer of a multi-billion-dollar fund. And he had every single person answer his call if he needed. And so him being able to do that for our startup founders, if we needed it, was just fantastic. The other thing was that we did have a couple in workforce and ed tech, especially during the COVID years. And he was able to support. He brought in, and I agreed to it, Iowa State and University of Iowa as partners, even though they didn't participate in any, money way, in any investment nature, but they were all in. And so we had open door to go to the Iowa State campus and do POCs over there, and the University of Iowa campus. We had all kinds of people willing to help out. And so partners can really play an important role in the help us understand whatever you do, how we work with you, all the way to opening doors, and also bringing their own expertise to the field.
Yeah. And for my part, I'm seeing already, I mean, we're in month 2 of our first accelerator with Permanente Medicine. I'm already seeing the difference that having a healthcare partner like that giving access to the founders is going to have on their trajectory. That portfolio is obviously way too young to talk outcomes, but in terms of just some of our unicorn portfolio we had out of, for instance, in the fintech space, which was partnered with Barclay for a bunch of it. Barclays, we had both Chainalysis and Alloy come out of that one. Our RGA accelerator, which is on IoT, is Latch and Owlet, both came out of that. So Latch being the door locks that are widely seen everywhere. The Kaplan EdTech program had Degreed and Newzella come out, and so on. There are several others that are earlier than unicorn stage, but we're seeing one out of the Target program now that's approaching getting there. So I think that when you have the combination of what we can bring to the founders through our accelerator platform, and you just add the free additional benefit of a partner coming in, as long as their goals are aligned with yours as a startup, and you get their mentorship and their access to potential POCs, if they're doing it for an innovation strategy reason, it's just an extra superpower. And I got a team of 1,800 doctors at Permanente Medicine who like to work with it, who help vet the companies in the application phase in ways in every specialty. So I got everything from cancer pathology studies to eyewear to mental health, and to have the physician specialist looking at the applications, even for fit up front, and then mentoring the companies and considering potential pilots with them is just supercharges a program. And that's what we get to see on our partner program.
Love it. Well, I'd like to, you guys have been doing this for a while. I'd love to talk about kind of how things have shifted over the last 5 or 10 years. And then maybe each of you can answer that. And then also think about, maybe answer, what are you excited about in the next, 3 to 5 years? I don't want to say 10 years is too far to look out, but yeah, what have you seen change over the last 5 or 10 years? What are you excited about today, and what are you excited for the coming years?
Well, even in the 6 years that I've been at Techstars, I have seen the number of startups increase like tenfold. I mean, anyone wants to start a company. They come out of college and they want to start a company, and not every company and every founding team is ready to be invested in. They're not investable. They have an idea, it sounds fun, and they don't want to work for anyone else. And so that's just grown incredibly. So there's a lot of noise. And so part of the time I spend just coaching founders like, do you really want to do this? This is a major, major step. Do you want to go? So the other thing is that there's a lot of noise on the investor side. A lot of micro funds spun up during that time, and accelerators, which aren't really accelerators, kind of started spinning up dev shops that said, hey, we have an incubator. And really what it was
We're a
is,
venture
hey,
studio now. Yeah.
your MVP, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll launch you. And so it just got really noisy over the last 6 years. And I think that's been something we've had to be more proactive, reaching out to founders who we think really mean business and who are going to change the world. And so that's what excites me. I spend most of my time on the outbound looking to meet founders who are building solutions to real world problems that they understand, that they are driven to solve. They're going to stick with it for 5, 10, whatever, however many years it takes. They're so driven by solving this problem that they really want to stay in it. And the way we find those people is fascinating. We're using AI now. We can find people who have a background in technology, who have started companies before or worked in tech before, who happen to be in stealth or even have a small startup under their name right now. And you reach out to these founders and say, hey, let's have a conversation. I've had 50 conversations over the last 2-3 weeks with founders, whether or not they're going to be accelerator ready. They've been fascinating conversations. These are the people who are really changing the world. And back to Keith's point, they're the ones swinging for the fences. They're not building little. They're building huge things, and they're trying to figure it out right now. So yeah, that excites me.
What about looking forward? What are you excited for in the coming years?
Yeah, so my current thesis is actually what I'm most excited about coming up. And for the spring, we're looking at, I think that the time is now for moving into taking the brains of AI and starting to maneuver the physical world. So we're investing in physical AI, robotics, still focused on, AI native in general, but we want it to be something that is swinging toward, this is not a me too. This is something unique. This is something that hasn't been done yet. And so my whole world right now is what's new and what's really changing the world in a positive way.
And Keith, what about you? Changes you've seen last 5-10 years, and what are you looking forward to right now?
Yeah, I guess in addition to what Kirty said in terms of changes, I'd say that, big shift is from tailwinds to headwinds over that period in the investment climate. And we've seen cycles like this before. I lived through them in the operator seat through 2 of the cycles, and now in the investor seat. And I will say, I think I prefer headwinds. It's not as fun at the time. Everything's hard, and the competition gets pre-vetted for you. You don't have all these silly companies coming out of nowhere and getting too much capital and big liquidation preferences. But if you can win through headwinds in tough markets, in more limited venture time, you're more likely to have a market to yourself and have a major expansion opportunity. So I actually think it favors really good strategic entrepreneurs who can be resilient and fight through. And that's kind of the test. The test will come up at some point. You're not going to have 5 winners of a market. So I'd rather shake it out early. And if I'm not going to win this thing, I can go on and do something else, as opposed to get this prolonged experiment with too much capital for a while. So I think we're in a headwinds time, which isn't inherently a bad thing.
Yeah, I'd say we shifted a little bit towards tailwinds with AI over the last couple of years. Yeah. But yeah, I was investing back in 2020, 21, which very much felt like tailwinds. And then everything all the brakes kind of slammed on in 22, 23. I was raising a fund at the time, very difficult, but also a really great time to be an investor in early stage companies, because if they were succeeding with all those headwinds, they were pretty great companies. And now, I feel like the winds have shifted a little bit. Yeah, you're like you said, you're just getting, a dime a dozen AI startup that, if I see another AI SDR startup pitch deck, I think I'm just going to just throw my computer out the window.
I got one of those for you if you want. We know I'm doing that. They're really good at it though. No. Yeah, no, the aggregate capital formation still isn't, is not back up to full levels. And if you're in a specific category, you'll certainly feel those tailwinds and the pull. So that's attractive. But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. Thanks.
So let's wrap up with some rapid fire. And I'll ask a question, and Kirty can start, and Keith will answer second. Best piece of advice you wish someone had given you earlier on?
Go for it. Trust your gut. Take greater risk.
I wish I had, don't chase the shiny object when you're thinking about go-to-market strategy. Actually get mentors and research the go-to-market before choosing one.
What's a recent book or resource that shaped your thinking?
It's going to sound really weird because I read about founders all the time and I love their founder stories. So I read bios all the time, but Outlive by Peter Attia. I've completely changed the way I move, eat, and exercise.
Great book. Yes. Yes, I love that one. So I'll say a book that changed my thinking, but it changed it before it was written. And now I see one of our co-founders, Brad Feld, wrote a book called Give First, but that's been the mantra of Techstars all the way through. Now it's immortalized in a book of the same name, but it's been our Techstars Mentor Manifesto for years. And I think it's the what we all live by here.
Most underrated skill for startup founders today?
Listening, observing.
But it's 100%. We do workshops on it. It's our sales workshop today was all about like keep listening, and it was an outsider who didn't even know us, but it was
All right, Keith, you get to go first next. Hot take: will AI create more opportunities than it destroys in the next 3 years?
Well, if you're talking about employment, it will destroy more. If it talk about certainly in the short term, we'll see what happens next. But in terms of broad opportunities from a consumer perspective and from an economic perspective, I think it'll create more.
I think 3 years is a really important turning point. If you listen to some of the experts out there, but I think more for 3 years, and then we're going to have a very sharp change after that.
What's the sharp change?
I think that people are going to find the seats to jump into for the greater opportunities. And after about 3 years, there aren't going to be very many seats.
I'm hopeful that there'll be a Jevons paradox at play here, where it gets cheaper than ever to build a company and take your idea to like a company, where you can just talk to an AI and it'll become your whole organization. And then it just accelerates, to use a kind of a pun intended there, but it just accelerates our ability to create value, because I can just talk to an AI on Replit and just start vibe coding my way to a solution that I want to see in the world, right?
Yep.
I'm hopeful it'll generate more opportunity, but I think it's going to be hard to retrain everybody that's used to just being told what to do 9 to 5 to become much more like, hey, what should I do? And what do I like? And what do I want to create and build in the world? And I think that's going to be a tough transition for people, even guided by AI. Kirty, you can go first on this one. What's an industry ripe for disruption but not yet disrupted?
Home maintenance and dirty job automation. That's my next company.
What about you, Keith?
Yeah, it's still healthcare. So I'm a kid in a candy store with all the opportunities here.
And last question, Keith, if you weren't in startups or VC or an accelerator for this matter, what would you be doing instead?
Oh, I think my Yankees pitching career could come back here with new healthcare. I got to get the arm working a little bit. No, I can't imagine doing anything else. Either I'm going to be starting one, supporting someone who does, or investing in it. So I really have no good answer.
Love it.
Fair, but I'll give it a little twist. I invest in real estate on the side, and I would probably do that full time, but I love space making. So creating like new spaces within old spaces, but also whole neighborhood transformations. So I'd probably be doing that.
And this has been a great conversation. Where can founders in particular find you guys online and find out more about Techstars?
LinkedIn is really easy for me. Reach out, Kerty Levy on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Kerty Levy on LinkedIn.
That's a nice problem to have. There's a lot of Brian Bells. You search Brian Bells, like, oh, I don't even know which one it is.
And definitely our website. We do get inbound and we look for it, especially right now. I'm looking for inbound. I'm looking for founders who are really creating unique things that are incredibly big swings, and they're incredibly game-changing.
Yeah, same. Find me on LinkedIn is a great way to find me. You can email Casey@techstars.com if you want. I will look at them after our demo day in December, but we're heads down in program right now, but love to catch up with founders working on interesting things.
Well, it's been an awesome conversation. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Brian.
Just terrific
Thanks
conversation.
for having us.